Hello everyone. Today I'm going to walk through how I make these eyeballs out of styrofoam, craft foam sheets, and cardstock. These styrofoam balls are from the dollar store, and I believe that everything I'm using can be found at either Dollarama or Michael's. These are super fun and easy to make. When making them, I'll make them in batches. They are great for costumes, props, or Halloween decor. I like using them to make ornaments. As you can see, I've already made some spider ornaments with them. But anyways, let's jump right into it. Our first step will be cutting the styrofoam. I use a sharp box cutter to slice the spheres in half. There is usually a visible seam that I use as a guide. I make sure to cut with an even pressure. I recommend cutting slowly and carefully. I also cut a small slice off the top. This is what your iris is going to sit on. Now that the domes are shaped how I want them, I'm going to stick them onto some wooden skewers. I'm using extra long Q-tips that I'm cutting in half. I'm saving the Q-tip ends for when I eventually apply Mod Podge later. I've used two techniques for these. One technique is to use modeling paste. This is great for covering unwanted texture, but it does require some sanding. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to be using Mod Podge today. So here I'm going to apply 2 coats of matte Mod Podge. I use my finger to spread it. I find I get better control this way, plus I don't need to wash any brushes afterwards. However, you can definitely use a brush or sponge to apply it. While our eyeballs are drying, let's get our irises ready. I am using a basic hole punch to punch out some black cardstock. These are our pupils. After that, I am using a larger hole punch to punch out some colored cardstock. I use a circle stencil and a pencil to draw out the iris on some craft foam. I really like using craft foam. It's very easy to cut into. It's also very easy to paint. I am hand cutting here. If you want to get a more precise look, you can use a metal punch. I've seen them called clay cutters, cookie cutters, or leather cutters. They have a bunch of names, but they are basically the same thing. Before I glue these pieces together, I'm going to do some pre-painting. I'm going to place the foam circles on these adhesive dots. These dots will hold the foam in place and make it easier to paint and glue later. When it comes to painting, I'll be honest, there is no solid method here. Just follow your heart. I typically paint the foam a darker color. After the paint is dry, I'll Mod Podge the paper piece onto the foam. Glue tends to warp paper, so you may find that the paper is lifting a little bit, you can either add weight to the paper while it's drying, or you can do what I did and squish the paper down with one of your craft paint bottles. Let's jump back to our eyeballs. Now that the Mod Podge is all dry, we can go in with some paint. I'm doing 2 coats of paint for the eyeballs. I decided to try some different colors here. I chose to go with pink and yellow along with some white. I think these turned out really cool. I like the way they look, and I think there's endless possibilities of different color combinations. I know I'm going to be experimenting with different color combinations in the future. I'll also be experimenting with different iris shapes. I think it'd be really cool to do some snake-like slit irises as well as some frog-like or goat-like irises, the funky shape. There's just so many different possibilities with this craft, and I know once I start making them, it's hard to stop, considering how easy it is to prep and paint these. While I wait for the coat of paint on the eyeballs to dry, I'm going to go back to my irises. Here is where I'm going to start futzing with the paint. I'm going to start blending the foam and the paper together with the same paint color. Here, I'm not using an official method. I'm just kind of playing around with it until I'm happy. I'll typically start with a darker color around the outside of the iris and kind of work my way in, going lighter as I work inward. Jumping back to the eyeballs, now that the paint is dry, I'm going to go in and add some veining. I tried picking complementary colors for the veins. For the white, I went with a neon pink. For the pink eyeballs, I went with a purple vein. And for the yellow eyeballs, I went with an orange vein. Jumping back to the iris once again, I am just going to be adding some more of the detail here. Like I mentioned, I start with a darker color on the outer edge, and then I work my way inward with lighter colors. I'm just feathering out the color, trying to get that typical eyeball look. Once I'm happy with the blended color, I will go in with some solid lines around the eyeball just to create a graphic effect and make that color really pop. I find that working with acrylic paint is very forgiving. If you aren't happy with, say, the colors or the blending or the shape or whatever, it's very easy to go back over top and kind of futz around until you are happy with it, which is very much my style. I don't really have a solid method for how I paint. I just keep going until I'm happy with it. Now that our pieces are all painted and ready to go, we can start assembling them with Mod Podge. I'm starting with the pupils here. I'm taking just a little dab of Mod Podge, putting it right in the middle of the iris before placing the pupil over top, just squishing it down, trying not to squish too much of the Mod Podge out from underneath. And about here is where my overhead camera decided to turn off randomly, so apologies for this blurry footage, but this is just me adding some white highlight over top of the pupil and the iris. I love adding this final touch. I feel like it really brings the eyeball to life. And here you see me using a box cutter to remove the irises from the foam dots that we stuck them to earlier. You want to be very careful here. One, not to cut yourself, and two, to not warp your foam that you just meticulously painted. And here I am just attaching the iris to the eyeball itself. Again, I'm using Mod Podge, just adding a light layer of Mod Podge over the eyeball before pressing the iris down onto it. Now we are at our final step, which is to add some glossy Mod Podge over top the entire eyeball. I use glossy because it creates that wet look that eyeballs have. You can add one or two layers. I typically just add the one, mainly because I'm lazy. But I think if you were to layer them, you might get more of a wet look, which could look really nice. And here they are, all assembled and beautiful. I am very happy with how these turned out. I think the one thing that I will change in the future is getting proper circle cutters for the foam. I'm fine with the hand cut look, but I think they could look even better if I were to actually get proper templates for the circles. Hopefully this video provided some inspiration to you. If you did enjoy this video, please consider giving it a like. This is my very first full YouTube video. Any support would mean so much. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.